You're listening to the Resilient Author Podcast, the show that goes beyond the pages to explore the grit, courage, and resilience it takes to write and publish a book. I'm your host, Carrie Human, and each week I sit down with authors to uncover the stories behind their stories, the challenges they faced, the breakthroughs they experienced, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Whether you're working on your first chapter or celebrating your launch, this is the place to find inspiration and practical takeaways for your own author journey. Let's dive in. All right, John. For those who may not know you yet, what's your book about, and what do you hope readers take away from it?
Well, actually, there are 6 books. They're all mystery suspense thrillers. My protagonist is a young woman in her 20s. You'll notice I'm neither of those. There's probably a 12-step program for that. But it's a series, but you don't have to read them in order. Probably the common thread, there are 2 common threads. One is journalism, that's my background. And so my protagonist goes into journalism, and as the series unfolds, she becomes a cops and courts reporter, and then she becomes a White House correspondent, which is what I did when Reagan was president. And the most recent novel, Enemies Domestic, she's White House press secretary. That's one sort of common theme. The other is grief and loss. The very first book deals with the apparent suicide of the aunt who raised her. And it's based to a certain degree on the suicide of my sister in 1980. I was on the scene that day, and so writing about it was a catharsis. But as I look back, grief and loss and journalism are constants in the Lark Chadwick series.
Hmm. You know, I'm sure you know this as an author, John, but most books, begin as a spark, maybe a question we just can't stop thinking about. Where did the idea for this book first come from? You said it's a series. Was there a particular moment or experience that really just sort of set this into motion for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I was working at CNN. I'd been a reporter. I was a writer, and then they made me an editor, and that was tedious, but it paid well. And so I needed a creative outlet. And so I was teaching myself how to write fiction, and I was doing a writing exercise. It was just the prompt was write about a personal experience. And so I was dutifully doing the just the facts, ma'am account of a car train collision that I witnessed as a kid. I was 9 years old. I was in the dome car of this train. It was the middle of the night. We were going through northern Illinois, and out of nowhere, this car comes from my left and crosses in front of the train, and we hit it. All this debris comes down, killed everybody in the car. And this is really an interesting thing about the what I call the spooky power of the subconscious. So I'm writing this a factual account about something that happened 40 years earlier. And as I was writing, I remembered a radio news report about a similar car train collision in which an infant survived. And I began to
Wow.
play what if? What if that kid grew up and wanted to find out more about her past? And so it was that what if question that sparked what became the first book, Fast Track.
Mm. Wow, it's so incredible, like you said, how the subconscious mind just starts to work and starts producing. You mentioned it just a little bit, but you spent 45 years in journalism, including some time as a White House correspondent and as one of Wolf Blitzer's editors at CNN. How did those experiences influence the themes of realism in your fiction?
There are 2 things that are at play there. One is that you're covering you come across people as a reporter sometimes on the worst day of their life, and
Mm.
so you see things and you experiencing things and you cover things that embed in your subconscious. The other thing that journalism enabled me to do is that journalism forces you to write succinctly and efficiently. You don't have time to sit there and wait for the muse to arrive. You've got a deadline, dude, and you got to write. And
Mm.
so being able to write tight, I think, really helped me access the stuff that was inside to articulate it onto the page.
Mm, I mean, was there Like when did you actually start to realize that like you had to tell this story? Like it just no longer was optional, like you had to write it.
Once I started to play around with the what if, what
Mm,
if this kid grew up to find out more and want to know about her past? That was it. That was the spark. And then I just started to play with it. And the manuscript went through 14 major revisions. It took
wow.
10 years to get the agent that I've got. We're still together 20 years later and six
Wow.
books later. And yeah, it took it was, and she's the 39th agent that I queried. So I tell my writing students, if you take good notes, I'll save you 9 years in the process.
You know, a lot of the listeners here, have fantasies and dreams of actually getting picked up by a publisher. Was there anything in you specific that wanted to go more of a traditional route versus going sort of the indie route?
Yeah, I mean, back in the mid 90s when I first started, self-publishing was not as big
Mm,
and as ubiquitous as it is now. It's much
mm,
easier now to get published, but there was something inside me that said, I could probably publish this myself, but I'd like to kind of hold out and see if somebody other than my mom, thinks it's good and, feels that they might actually be able to make money on my writing. And
mm,
so, you know, self-publishing was in my back pocket, but there was something that told me that, give it a try, bring your writing to a professional level and see what happens. And I was very fortunate.
mm. Well, luckily you didn't stop at what, 38? You made it to
38.
39.
Oh man, I
Mm,
know people that go into the hundreds.
mm. Wow. Yeah, persistence, absolutely.
Exactly. Yep.
So just making like a little left turn here. What was it like for you sort of making that leap from journalist to novelist? You know, did your relationship with truth and storytelling change, once you began like really writing fiction?
It did in one way, in that unlike what some presidents will tell you, it is a firing offense at reputable news organizations to make things up. We can't do that. It's baked into your DNA.
Mm,
And so it was kind of hard to give myself permission to make things up.
mm,
Once I did that, the floodgates opened and it was very liberating from the standpoint of fiction. Fortunately, there was no, blowback that manifested itself in my news copy.
mm.
But, it was definitely liberating to write, to be able to make things up.
I bet. I bet. I mean, you said you have what, six books in the series?
Six books and counting.
Wow, that's exciting.
I'm as
What
surprised I'm as surprised as you are.
So was there a time where you thought it might have been over, or have you always sort of had this, well, maybe there's one more book after you finish one?
Sure, I've never had a point where I've thought, no, I'm not going to be able to do this again. I mean, there is imposter syndrome. I sit down after having written, even five novels. I sit down and I go, can I do this again? How do I do this again? But
Mm,
there's never been a lack of an idea. I kind of know where I'm going in book seven, but I've got procrastination nailed. So I'm not under the gun. I'm not writing with a gun at my head, having
mm,
to crank something out, just anything. I
mm.
like to let it simmer and fester and, work with it that way.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, just giving it some time to breathe. John, what would you say has been like the biggest obstacle or doubt you face while writing, and how do you move through it? Again, I know you've been doing this for a while, but could you speak to just that in general?
Yeah, I think the biggest doubt is not so much imposter syndrome. I mean, I'm fairly confident in my abilities, but I think that the biggest frustration, if maybe that's too strong a word, but question is as I alluded to a minute ago, is forgetting the process. Not sure, how do I do this again? And I have to kind of go back over my notes that I teach my students, and I go, oh yeah, that's how I do it. And sort of, in a sense, teaching myself or reteaching myself, stuff that I've already learned but forgot along the way.
Mm, mm. So
your fourth novel. I did a little bit of homework. Bullet in the Chamber deals with your son's heroin overdose.
Right.
How did you find the courage to write about something so raw? And what did the process teach you about grief and healing overall?
Wow. How much time do we have? Um, Look, people have said that it took courage to write that and to talk about it, and I appreciate that. But there's something in me, and maybe it's the journalist in me, that doesn't flinch from the truth.
Mm,
And sadly, suicide and heroin addiction are, two of the most stigmatized topics. But for
mm,
some reason, I'm able to talk about it. And I find that doing so gives other people permission to come forward and share their stories too.
mm,
So I don't see myself as particularly courageous, but I guess that the reason I was able to do it is that I couldn't not do it. I felt that writers need to write what they know, and I think it's important to move toward the pain. I think it's therapeutic. And
mm,
so I just was able to do it, access it, get it onto the page. And I think there's a certain distance that you have from the actual event because you're working through a fictional character who's not really you.
mm,
And the circumstances are in many ways different than the actual experience that I went through. So I think that once a person gives it a try, moves toward it, and writes things down. You can do it as journaling, in poetry, writing music, creating art. There are any number of ways to work through your grief. I just chose storytelling, and it's just been tremendously freeing, and it's connected me with people on a deeper level who have also experienced it. There's one more thing I'll say about grief, and then I'll shut up. And that is, it's a universal feeling. And it doesn't
mm,
mean even the loss of a child or a loved one. It can be the loss of a pet, a job, a relationship, your innocence, your health. Any number of things can produce a grief experience. And those experiences are universal. We all have experienced them. But
mm,
because they're so intense, we often feel like no one else understands. And yet people do. It's just that we keep it inside.
mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, John. I know obviously people grieve differently.
Yep.
And it sounds like for you, writing has really been a healthy way for you to release and really just dig into those things.
I hope so. I think so.
Mm. You talked about this a little bit earlier. We kind of joked about it, but you write from a female perspective in your
Right.
Lark Chadwick series.
Right.
What inspired that choice, and what has it taught you about empathy and connection?
Phew. Another really powerful area to go into. Why
Mm,
do I write as a woman? To be honest with you, it was not a calculated decision. There's a superficial reason, and that is when I started writing fiction, someone suggested that I should write in a way that stretches who I am. Never been
mm,
a woman, at least not in this life. So I gave it a try. And one of the things I discovered is that emotions are not gender specific. We all
mm,
have the exact same emotions. It's just that in my experience, the women in my life are more willing to share their emotions and they're more articulate about their emotions. So I had a lot of conversations with women at CNN over the 25 years I was there. Many of them
mm,
were in their early to mid 20s, and they'd tell me their stories about their romances and their careers and their families and their job. And I asked them questions about what it's like to be a woman. And I
mm,
made a lot of discoveries. One was I asked, there was one anchor I worked with. She was gorgeous. And I asked her, what's it like for guys to come on to you all the time? And she said, I can tell in the first 20 seconds if I'm safe. I never
Wow.
have to worry about being safe in a
Wow.
conversation. And that was when I realized that being a woman means playing defense.
Mm,
Just one of
wow.
those little nuggets you pick up.
Mm.
And then these women became beta readers for me and helped me make sure I didn't step in it.
Wow. So let's dive in there a little bit. So now that you've honed, this voice, what have you learned about, the mistakes men often make in
Oh
building
man. Oh
meaningful
man.
relationships with women?
I mean, here's the thing. There was another woman I worked with at CNN, also gorgeous, was going through a divorce, and
Mm,
she said at one point, just kind of off the cuff, she said, "I always seem to fall for the bad boys." And I
mm,
remember asking her, I said, "Why is that?" And she kind of looked stunned, like no one had ever asked her that before. And
mm,
she thought about it for a minute, and she said, and she wasn't being conceited. She said, "They seem to be the only ones that have the confidence to approach me."
mm,
The problem is, bad boys have the confidence, but they can also be mean. And the problem is the nice guys are too nice. And so that's not particularly attractive. You know,
mm,
um, Often guys approach women, beautiful women, and they put them on a pedestal. Oh, you're beautiful, and blah, blah, blah. They hear this all the time. It's boring. And what they really want is to play, to banter.
mm,
And so what ends up happening is if indeed there is some sort of connection, what then happens is the guy becomes needy, and that's not attractive. And
mm,
so there's that dynamic as well. And a lot of guys strike out with women because, they're trying to impress them. I'm making so much money, or I'm really important, blah, blah, blah. It's about them.
mm,
There was a woman who took one of my writing classes, and she was writing a book on, 100 first dates, uh, what do you call it? Online dating. And I said, "Is there a
mhm.
pattern here?" And she said, "Men don't know how to have a conversation with a woman. It's all about
Goodness.
them. They don't ask me
Mm,
any questions. They don't care about me. They care about impressing me. And that's not
mm,
impressive." So I don't
mm,
know. I think guys strike out a lot. They think
mm,
they're scoring cool points, and they're just striking out and they don't know it.
mm. There's some nuggets in there. I'm sure whoever needed to hear that heard it. At least
I
I
hope
hope
so.
so.
I hope so. There are a lot of women who hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this, John. You've published a handful of books, and it sounds like you're not done. How has publishing your books changed you? In your
Mm.
work, your relationships, or just in the way you see like reality, your life?
Woof, man. I keep being surprised that people read my books and like them. People you don't know say, "Oh, I really love, what's happening with Lark?" It's encouraging when the character sticks with a person after they close the book. I got a text from a woman, 2 in the morning saying, "What's happening with Lark? I need another Lark book." Um, how has my life changed? There's a lot more purpose. There's a lot
Mm,
more confidence. I mean, you get positive feedback, and that's encouraging. There was a woman who reviewed one of my novels. She reviewed Troubled Water, I think. And she said, as soon as I realized it was a guy writing as a woman, I couldn't wait to take this guy apart. She said, after the fifth page, I forgot it was a guy.
wow.
And so that kind of feedback, gives you confidence, but I have to keep pinching myself because I don't want to get overconfident. I know I can't please everybody, but
Mm,
I think just one more thing. I think
mm,
that I mentioned confidence, but, and this also goes hand in hand with grief, because there's a fear dimension in grief. And I think there's
mm,
definitely a fear dimension in writing, and it can be a crippler. But once you've faced grief and the worst that can happen, fewer things frighten me. And
mm,
one of the things I teach in my writing classes is how to, face your writing fears. And the thing I've
mm,
discovered is that, courage is a byproduct. It's not
mm,
something that just shows up and go, "Okay, you're courageous now." It means facing your fear and going forward anyway. It's
mm,
harnessing the fear. And that's courage, fear in action, going forward anyway. That's true
mm,
in life, and it's true in writing.
mm. I hear people talk about being afraid, but to your point, the courage only comes when you take the steps. Like no one's naturally courageous. It's like you have to feel fear to even be courageous.
That's true. And there's something I call the fear continuum. There's
Mm,
recklessness, that's no fear at all.
mm,
And there are consequences to that. There's caution, that's counting the cost. Is this going to kill me, bankrupt me, whatever. There's
mm,
there's cowardice. That means you know what you should do and you freeze. And then there's
mm,
courage. Though all those things. I can give you a quick example of recklessness. My
mm,
son James is a jazz drummer.
mm,
He's not so much active in it right now, but he's a professional.
mm,
Visited me in D.C. and we went to an open mic jazz session. And I asked him, "Are you going to go up there and play?" And he goes, "No." I should have listened. I go swaggering up there and I take the sticks from the house drummer and they call something. It's 4/4 medium swing. I can do that.
mm,
Then a couple of horn players get up. I discovered later that they had just played a gig at the Kennedy Center. So I'm in way over my head, but I don't know it. So they
mm,
call something, they count it down, they're flying. I'm still taxiing. You
mm,
know you're in trouble when during the song, the house drummer sidles up to you and goes, "I'll take over." So here I am trading sticks with them. Major fail, major fail. So if when you fail, that's, nothing gets worse than that.
mm. You went for it though, John. I'll give you
I went
kudos for
for it.
that.
I
You
went
went
for it.
for
I
it.
learned from it.
Yep, you're in the arena. In the arena.
Right.
Um, so speaking of courage, what has helped you keep going, when the process of writing has gotten tough, you've dealt with grief, you've had life happening around you. Like what keeps you going? Do you have a practice? Is there something you do?
There's nothing magic that I do. I think part of it, I'm an Aries. That means I'm
Mm,
persistent,
mm,
and stubborn, probably. I think that, you look back and you see, there's been some success here. I've been able to do it. So, why should I give up now? I mean, I'm old. I'm not going to tell you how old, but I'm living as if I've got another 25, 30 years to go. I'm not
mm,
assuming that, but I'm not giving up. Life is fascinating. There's so much more that I want to be able to do. And
mm,
so I see life as a gift and as a challenge and as an experience. And so, that's my process. It's looking forward, not regretting the past, not fearing the future, but being
mm,
present in the moment where I can be effective. That's where the change happens. That's where that's where choices can be made to make a
mm,
difference.
mm. Really love that perspective.
Thank
Um,
you.
You mentioned earlier that you have the privilege to have a writing class, you have students, you probably get to edit a lot of different manuscripts.
Yeah.
Um, what's one of the most common mistakes you see writers make, and how can they avoid it?
Ooh, a lot of common mistakes. Here's a mistake that I never see, and that's the writer who wants to write but gets intimidated. They look at all the great
Mm,
writing that's around them and they go, "Oh, I
mm,
can't do this." And they talk themselves out of it. So I think that's the biggest mistake
wow.
is not trusting yourself. Once you do that, though, I see a lot of mistakes in manuscripts. And one of the things I've learned from going to writers' conferences, talking to agents, is that agents get queried like 150 times a day. They make a decision on a manuscript, an 80,000 word manuscript, on the first page.
Wow.
Often, often, and it's not fair, but they know what the gold standard is and they can tell right away if you're meeting it.
Mm,
Instead of enticing and hooking the agent, what a rookie writer will do is start throwing backstory in, giving the
mm,
reader context. No, get the story started and then you
mm.
can sprinkle the fairy dust in as the story unfolds.
That's really good advice. I think as writers in general, we have this, oh, I need to
You've frozen. There you are.
Okay. Yeah, that hasn't happened before.
So I
What
was a
was the
first.
last? Yeah, I think we're
We were just talking about um, the so much backstory, and you were just about you were very enthusiastically making a point, and the internet goes, "Whoa, we can't handle this."
Yeah, all I was saying is that there's so much backstory, and to your point, you got to get to it. Get the fairy dust in there later. People are they want to know if this can actually keep the pace. So I can resonate with that. But it's hard, I would imagine, for writers to just pull back and just get right to it.
Right. And it helps to have beta readers, people who are objective enough to be able to tell you what's not working. You know, that
Mm.
it's a wise idea, I think, to bring in beta readers with whom you don't share a last name or a bed, because they're either gonna break your spirit or they're gonna be so complimentary that it's no help at all. But someone
Mm.
who's got an arm's length relationship, they'll still tell you, oh, it should be a movie. Great. You need to hear that. But where did you fall asleep? Where did it not, where did it fall apart? What
Mm.
doesn't make sense? That kind of stuff.
Mm. Any pro tips on finding like reliable beta readers?
I think if you know what the genre is that you've written, if you're writing a thriller, a mystery, a romance, whatever, try to find someone that reads those kinds of books because they know
Mm.
what the story expectation is because they're familiar with it and they'll be able to tell you if you're meeting the mark. Um, But there are people already in your life who know you're writing a novel and they're itching to get their hands on it because they want to know, how are you doing? It's not
Mm.
hard. I don't think it's hard. And if you've got friends, you've got potential beta readers.
Mm. Mm. Just got to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Mm. So we're gonna wrap up soon, but we talked a little bit before we started. What's next for you, John? I know there might be another book, but you also mentioned that you're sort of branching out. What's the sort of next chapter for you?
Next chapter, I've written a memoir, and I'm shopping that around. But something more in the present moment is that I'm expanding my business so that I'm not just teaching people in the writing community how to write, but I'm also looking for opportunities in the business community, working with CEOs to help people who are struggling with grief, no matter what kind of grief, to use writing as a way to heal. This can be valuable in a corporate situation for wellness programs, because unresolved grief can be a problem with absenteeism, low morale, high turnover. You've got veterans organizations with vets dealing with PTSD,
Mm.
hospitals that have hospice programs. Writing can be a way of healing. So I'm looking to find, get myself in front of a wider audience.
Mm. I love that. Is this something you would be looking to do in person or virtually or kind of a hybrid?
All of the above. It depends on what the need is. If I
Mm.
can talk to an event planner, I can find out what their need is and if I can meet it.
Mm. Love that. Using writing to help heal grief is, yeah, I mean, I think people who journal probably really benefit from that, but that's an incredible offering that you're putting out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I like to sort of end the show with something I call the final chapter. If you could leave one message, that lingers with our audience, something they'll carry long after this episode, what would it be?
Take a breath.
Mm.
Take another one. Get quiet. Be aware of where you are right now and quit worrying about the future or regretting the past. Just be in the moment.
Mm. That's such a great reminder, Sean. Such a great reminder. Um, where can people find your books and follow your journey moving forward?
Best place would be on my website, which is myname.com, and it's one of those tricky Greek ones, so I'll spell it. JohnDeDakis.com, John, D as in dog, E, D as in dog, A, Kis as in Sam, JohnDeDakis.com. It's got thumbnails of my books. It's got information about my speaking, being interviewed on podcasts, my, all anything you need to know. It's all there, and you can get through to me through different portals on different pages.
There you have it. John, thank you so much for this honest and inspiring conversation. Truly an honor to have you here today.
Oh, Carrie, it was wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Resilient Author Podcast. I hope today's conversation gave you both inspiration and practical tools for your own journey. If you've been carrying the idea for a book, but haven't started, or you started and feel stuck, I'd love to invite you to join my 5-day Speak Your Book Challenge. In just 5 days, you'll speak the outline of your first draft and discover how to turn it into a finished manuscript and a published book. You can join anytime at voicetobook.co/challenge. Until next time, keep going, stay resilient, and remember, your story matters.